My name is Talia, and for most of my life my family treated me like an unfinished sentence, something awkward they never quite knew how to explain. I was 32 years old, a woman with a career I loved, when I finally understood that my parents had never expected me to become anything worth celebrating. Not because I failed, but because I succeeded in the wrong direction. In our house, success had a very specific shape. It wore tailored suits. It shook hands firmly, showed up on time and followed tradition. That shape belonged to my older brother, Ethan. Ethan was everything my parents admired. Athletic without trying. Charismatic without effort. He followed the script flawlessly. Good grades in respectable subjects, law school, a polished corporate career. My parents spoke about him the way people talk about finished masterpieces. And then there was me. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't troubled. I was just elsewhere. While Ethan thrived in conversations and connections, I disappeared into patterns, systems, logic. Machines made sense to me in ways people never did. When I was 10, my uncle gave me an old desktop computer. To me, it felt like being handed a universe. To my parents, it felt like competition. They never yelled about it. That would have been easier. Instead, their disappointment was quiet, persistent, a constant hum under every conversation. "You're very imaginative," my mother would say, the way people talk about children they don't expect much from. "You'll grow out of it," my father insisted. "It's just a phase." But I didn't grow out of it. At 14, the difference between Ethan and me became painfully clear. 2 months before my birthday, my parents gave him a brand new car. They made speeches about responsibility and potential. Everyone clapped. When my birthday came, I asked for something small, a coding magazine subscription. $30. That was it. Instead, I opened a velvet box. A pearl necklace. My mother smiled proudly. "Now you'll look presentable. Like a young lady." Thanked her. I always thanked her. Then I asked softly if she'd seen my other request. My father didn't even hesitate. "We're not encouraging that computer obsession. Ethan is building a real future. You need to stop hiding behind screens." So I saved my allowance and bought the magazines myself, hiding them under my mattress like contraband. That pattern never changed. In high school, my computer science teacher pulled my parents aside and told them I was gifted. Not good, exceptional. Scholarship level exceptional. My parents smiled politely, then dismissed it. "We want her well-rounded," my mother said. "She shouldn't put all her hopes into something so niche," my father added. That word followed me for years. By the time I dropped out of business school, after realizing I was suffocating, I already knew what they'd say. And they didn't disappoint. At Christmas dinner, my father laughed while explaining my decision to relatives. "She's chosen to fail on her own terms." I didn't argue. I just stopped showing up. For 10 years, I lived in the space they thought was empty, building something they never imagined existed. And then one evening my phone rang. My mother's voice was cheerful in that dangerous way. "Talia, darling, your brother just got engaged. We're having a small family dinner." I stared out at the city skyline from my office window, surrounded by glass and quiet authority. She didn't know who she was talking to anymore. And neither did I know whether I was ready to remind her. That dinner invitation would pull me back into the very house that taught me I'd never be enough, and unknowingly set the stage for the moment that would collapse everything my family believed about me. I almost didn't go. Every logical part of me screamed that attending my brother's engagement dinner was a mistake. I had spent years building distance for a reason. Distance was safety. But something quieter, more stubborn, insisted this wasn't about them anymore. It was about closure. The days leading up to the dinner were split between two worlds. By day, I was leading executive meetings, finalizing a massive acquisition that would redefine my company's future. By night, I replayed old memories. Thanksgivings where my work was reduced to jokes, birthdays where I was praised for being creative instead of capable. Saturday arrived faster than I wanted. Standing in my closet, I realized something ironic. I owned clothes worth more than my parents' car, yet none of them felt right. Dressing too powerful would look like provocation. Dressing down would confirm their assumptions. So I chose neutral, confident, me. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, nothing had changed. Same hedges, same warm lights, same expectations. My mother opened the door with a smile that paused just long enough to register surprise. "You came," she said, as if attendance was optional, or unlikely. Inside, the house smelled like roast and nostalgia. My father greeted me with a brief, awkward hug. Ethan followed, glowing with happiness, and for a moment, I felt genuinely glad for him. Then I met Claire. Ethan's fiancée was warm, sharp-eyed, and observant. When she shook my hand, something flickered in her expression. Recognition maybe, but it passed. Conversation settled into familiar rhythms. Praise for Ethan. Wedding plans. Career achievements that earned nods of approval. Then the question came. "So, Talia," my mother said lightly, handing me a glass of wine. "What are you doing these days?" "Still dabbling." Smiled. "Work keeps me busy." Claire looked genuinely interested. "You're in tech, right?" I gave a simplified answer. Years of practice had taught me that details invited dismissal. That's when Claire mentioned her job. "My company was just acquired," she said. "It's been unsettling." My stomach tightened. "What company?" my mother asked. "Innovate." The room didn't react, but I did. Innovate. The company we had acquired. The deal I'd finalized days ago. The employees I'd just reassured. Claire went on unaware. "The acquiring company is Nexus. No one's met the CEO yet. They're kind of legendary." My father laughed. "Sounds stressful." "I'll stick to something stable." Ethan grinned. "Right, Talia. Startups are risky." I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because the legendary CEO they were discussing, the one inspiring fear and speculation, was sitting right there. And Claire was looking at me differently now. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Talia, your last name." I met her gaze. "Evans." The air shifted. She froze. And then she asked the question that cracked the evening wide open. Claire's voice trembled as she spoke my name again. And in that moment, I knew the truth was seconds away from detonating across the table. "Evans," Claire repeated. My mother laughed nervously. "Oh, what a coincidence. There's another Talia Evans out there making waves, apparently." But Claire wasn't laughing. Her face had gone pale. She stood slowly, eyes locked on mine, pieces clicking together with terrifying speed. "No," she whispered. "That's not a coincidence." The room went silent. You're her," Claire said. "You're the CEO of Nexus." Time froze. My father's glass slipped from his hand, red wine spilling across the tablecloth. My mother's smile collapsed mid-expression. Ethan stared at Claire like she'd spoken a foreign language. I didn't smile. I didn't correct them gently. I just nodded. "Yes." The word landed like an earthquake. Ethan shook his head. "That's not possible." "It is," I said calmly. My father stammered. 300 million. I nodded again. The strange thing was, I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. Within seconds, the narrative rewrote itself. My mother rushed to my side, hands gripping my shoulders. "I always knew," she said too loudly. "I always told people you were brilliant." I stared at her. The same woman who'd told her friends I played computer games for a living. My father leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Oh, Nexus, what's the valuation these days?" That's when it hit me. Their respect hadn't arrived. Their curiosity had. Money had translated me into a language they understood. I stood up. "I need to leave." "What?" my mother protested. "We haven't even celebrated." "There's nothing to celebrate," I said quietly. Ethan finally spoke. "I don't understand." "I know," I said. "That's the problem." I walked out before they could say anything else. And for the first time, proving them wrong didn't feel like winning. Felt like loss. But the truth wasn't finished unraveling, and the aftermath would force me to decide what kind of relationship, if any, I was willing to have with them now. My phone exploded the next morning. Texts from my mother filled the screen. Pride, guilt, urgency tangled together. My father wanted to talk business. Ethan sounded confused, almost hurt. I ignored them all. Instead, I stood in front of hundreds of employees at Innovate, introducing myself as the CEO they'd feared. Claire met my eyes from the audience and nodded. This was where I belonged. After days of silence, I sent one message. "Meet me. Tomorrow. Coffee shop." This ends there. They arrived together, nervous and uncertain. My mother reached for my hand. Pulled away. "No rewriting history," I said. "No pretending." I laid it all out. The years of dismissal, the mockery, the embarrassment they felt about me. My mother cried. My father argued. Ethan stayed silent. Finally, I said the truth they couldn't escape. Your pride showed up the moment my success had a price tag. That's not love. Silence. I'll attend holidays, I continued. But I'm not your trophy. You don't get to benefit from what you tried to bury. I stood up. This is the boundary. And I walked away. Rehook. Walking into the sunlight, I realized something startling. I hadn't lost a family that day. I had finally stopped chasing one. Part 5. The cost of freedom. Almost equals 650 words. Freedom didn't feel triumphant. Felt quiet. Weeks passed. The messages stopped. The guilt faded. And something unexpected filled the space. Peace. A work. Led. Built. And slowly, the ache loosened its grip. I understood then that success doesn't heal old wounds. It just reveals them. I hadn't built my company to prove anything. I built it because I believed in something no one else could see. And that belief had always been enough. But sometimes the strongest victory isn't being seen. It's finally seeing yourself clearly. In the months that followed, life didn't dramatically change on the outside, but internally everything shifted. I expected grief. I expected anger. What I didn't expect was relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing myself for disappointment that hadn't yet happened. I wasn't rehearsing explanations. I wasn't shrinking my achievements before anyone could dismiss them. The absence of my parents' voices, critical, comparative, conditional, created a silence that felt unfamiliar at first, almost unsettling. But silence, I learned, can be healing. Work continued at a relentless pace. The Nexus Innovate integration moved forward smoothly. Claire proved herself to be exactly what I'd suspected that first night. Smart, steady, and quietly formidable. We developed a professional respect that grew into something like trust. She never brought up the dinner again, and I never asked her to choose sides. She didn't need to. Her actions spoke clearly. Ethan tried once more. He called late one evening, his voice hesitant, stripped of the confidence I'd always associated with him. I didn't know, he said, about any of it. I know, I replied. I should have said something. Back then. Yes, I said honestly. You should have. He didn't argue. That silence was his apology. We didn't rebuild our relationship overnight. Maybe we never will. But something small and real replaced something large and false. And that was enough. My parents sent one last message, carefully worded, full of regret and pride tangled together. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty but clarity. Some conversations don't heal. They reopen wounds you've already learned to live without. And then something unexpected happened. One afternoon, while reviewing applications for a new mentorship initiative at Nexus, I read a letter from a 16-year-old girl who reminded me painfully of myself. Quiet, brilliant, uncertain. Her parents didn't understand her passion for technology. They wanted something safer. She wrote, I don't know if I'm wasting my time, but this feels like the only thing that makes sense to me. I closed my laptop and cried. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't anymore. I realized then that my story didn't end at that dinner table. It didn't end with vindication or confrontation. It ended with choice. I chose not to become bitter. I chose not to weaponize my success. I chose not to keep begging people to see me. Instead, I chose to be seen by myself. I replied to that girl personally. I told her the truth. No sugarcoating, no guarantees. I can't promise this path will be easy, I wrote. But I can promise this. The world needs people who follow what makes sense to them, even when it doesn't make sense to others. That was the lesson my family never taught me. Success didn't make me worthy. I had always been worthy. Money didn't validate my choices. Consistency did. And walking away didn't mean I lost my family. It meant I stopped losing myself. Sometimes proving people wrong isn't about showing them the results. It's about refusing to live by their limitations any longer. I didn't need applause. I didn't need apologies. I needed peace. And I finally had it. As I stood in my office one evening, city lights stretching endlessly beyond the glass, I thought about the girl I'd been. The one hiding magazines under her mattress, the one told she'd fail anyway. If I could speak to her now, I wouldn't tell her she'd become rich or powerful. I'd tell her this. You survive. You build. And one day you stop asking for permission to exist. That was my real success. Because sometimes the most powerful ending isn't revenge or recognition. It's walking forward without needing either.